There's a thought experiment that keeps resurfacing in the Jujutsu Kaisen community, usually framed as admiration. What if Gojo had just killed all the higher-ups? The responses are predictable: celebrations of power, fantasies of a cleaner world. But there's a reason Gojo never did it, and it's not mercy, it's not strategy. Gojo Satoru understood something most viewers don't. The strongest sorcerer in the world cannot fix a broken system by force. He can only accelerate its collapse. If he had acted on that impulse, if he had decided one morning that the old guard needed to die, he wouldn't have saved Jujutsu Society. He would have shattered it beyond recognition. This isn't speculation. This is what happens when you remove the pillars of a corrupt institution without understanding what holds the weight once they're gone. Imagine Gojo walking into the chamber where the higher-ups convene. Hollow purple. It's over in seconds. The people who ordered Yuji Itadori's execution, who manipulated Suguru Geto, who let children die for political convenience, they're gone. The community cheers. Justice served. But that's where the fantasy ends and the nightmare begins. The higher-ups aren't just bureaucrats. They're the infrastructure. They control mission assignments. They manage the flow of resources to sorcerers in the field. They maintain the barrier between Jujutsu Society and the mundane world. They negotiate with political entities that allow Jujutsu Society to exist without government interference. Remove them, and you don't get freedom. You get a vacuum. Vacuums don't stay empty. Gojo knows this. He's not naive. When he tells Megumi Fushiguro that he could kill the higher-ups but chooses not to, it's not because he lacks conviction. It's because he's already run the calculation. He's already seen how it ends, and it ends with more corpses, not fewer. Within hours of the executions, every major clan learns what happened. Not because they mourned the dead, they didn't, but because the balance of power shifted in a way no one authorized. The Zenin would move first, not out of loyalty to the dead, but because Gojo just demonstrated he's willing to ignore every unspoken rule that keeps the clans from tearing each other apart. If he can kill the higher-ups without consequence, what stops him from deciding the Zenin are next? Now Bito wasn't sentimental. He would have seen Gojo's action for what it was, a declaration that power supersedes law, and in that world, the Zenin have to assume they're on the list.
The Kamo would fortify. They'd recall their sorcerers, consolidate resources, and begin reaching out to minor clans. Not to attack Gojo, no one's that stupid, but to form a coalition. If Gojo can act alone, they need to act together. Hidden alliances, cursed tools redistributed, binding vows with entities Gojo can't track. And the students? They'd wake up to discover their teacher just committed an act that every clan will interpret as the beginning of a purge. The higher-ups managed the mission assignment system. Imperfectly, yes. Corruptly, yes. But it functioned. Sorcerers knew where to go, what grade of curse they were facing, and what support they could expect. The moment those administrators are gone, that system stops. Not because no one else could manage it, but because no one has the authority to make other sorcerers comply. Within a week, you'd see it. Missions going unanswered because no one trusts who's assigning them. Grade 1 sorcerers refusing to take orders from Tokyo Jujutsu High because Gojo isn't a bureaucrat, he's a teacher who just murdered his way to the top. Regional offices going dark because their funding and oversight came from the now dead higher-ups and no one stepped in to replace them. Curses don't stop appearing because the infrastructure collapsed. If anything, they'd increase. The ambient fear and chaos Gojo just unleashed, that's cursed energy. That's fuel. You'd see a spike in curse manifestations within the first month, concentrated in areas where sorcerer presence suddenly vanished, because no one knows who's giving orders anymore. And here's the cruelty. Gojo can't fix this by being stronger. He can't be everywhere. He can kill any curse that appears in front of him, but he can't administer a nationwide network of sorcerers who no longer trust the chain of command. Strength doesn't scale to logistics. Other countries have their own sorcerer organizations, most smaller, weaker, but functional. They all maintained relations with Japan's higher-ups, information exchanges, extradition agreements for cursed objects, protocols for cross-border curse incidents. The moment Gojo kills the higher-ups, those relationships freeze. From their perspective, Japan just had a coup, and the person who staged it is the most dangerous individual on the planet. They don't see a hero cleaning house. They see a rogue sorcerer who decided the rules don't apply to him. Their response is predictable. Isolation. No more cooperation. No more shared intelligence. Some might even prepare countermeasures, researching barriers or curse techniques that could theoretically contain Gojo if he ever decides the leadership is next. Gojo just made Japan's Jujutsu Society an international pariah, and he did it while sitting on a stockpile of cursed objects and techniques that other nations now have even more incentive to steal or neutralize. The deeper damage isn't structural, it's psychological. Gojo's students looked up to him because he represented something different. Strength, yes, but also restraint. He could reshape the world and chose not to, because he believed in creating something better through the next generation. That's why Yuji trusted him, why Megumi respected him, why even Maki Zenin, who had every reason to hate the system, saw Gojo as someone who understood the difference between power and righteousness. The moment he kills the higher-ups, that image shatters. Now the lesson is clear. If you're strong enough, you can do whatever you want. Consequences are for the weak. And that's not empowerment, that's nihilism. That's the exact philosophy that broke Geto. Strength gives you the right to decide who lives and who doesn't. The world is divided into those who can act and those who suffer. Yuji would be the first to feel it. He'd look at Gojo and see someone who just killed human beings, not curses, not curse users, but people, because they were obstacles. Yuji's character is built on the belief that there's a right way to do things, even when it's hard. Gojo just told him that belief is a luxury only the weak afford. Megumi would shut down. He's already wary of his own potential for darkness, already questioning what kind of person he'll become. Watching his teacher cross that line confirms his worst fear. Strength inevitably corrupts, and the best you can hope for is to die before it does. In Maki, maybe she'd understand, maybe even approve. But that's the tragedy, because Maki's rage is justified, and Gojo acting on it validates the idea that the only way to change Jujutsu society is through violence. It would eliminate any possibility of reform, any chance for the next generation to build something different. It would lock them all into an endless cycle of purges and retribution. There's a reason this scenario mirrors Geto's fall so precisely. Geto didn't become a curse user because he was weak or stupid. He broke because he saw the suffering caused by non-sorcerers and calculated that eliminating them would reduce the total amount of pain in the world. It was a utilitarian nightmare, but logical from his perspective. And Gojo couldn't stop him, not because he wasn't strong enough, because you can't punch ideology into submission. If Gojo kills the higher-ups, he's just validated Geto's philosophy. He's proven that when you strip away the rationalizations, the strongest sorcerer will eventually decide the ends justify the means, that the world is broken and violence is the only tool that matters. Geto would have been proven right, not morally right, but predictively right. He told Gojo that their friendship ended because they chose different paths, but those paths were always going to converge. Power without accountability doesn't create heroes, it creates tyrants, even well-intentioned ones. Gojo carrying out the execution would be his admission that Geto understood something he didn't want to accept, that strength isolates you from morality, that eventually you stop asking, "Should I?" and start asking, "Who's going to stop me?" No one. That's who.
And that's the problem. 6 months after Gojo's purge, Jujutsu society is fractured into factions. Some rally behind Gojo, convinced he's the only one willing to do what's necessary. Others oppose him, not because they loved the higher-ups, but because they refuse to live under a dictatorship. Civil conflict erupts, not open war because no one would fight Gojo directly, but assassinations, sabotage, cursed spirits deliberately unleashed in areas controlled by his supporters. Curse activity spikes, the infrastructure never recovered, sorcerers are spread thin, civilians who relied on Jujutsu Society's protection start dying in larger numbers. Gojo can't be everywhere, and his allies are too busy managing internal threats to handle the external ones. The clans experiment with forbidden techniques, binding vows with cursed spirits, incomplete Uzumaki rituals, anything that might give them leverage against Gojo or his students. The horrors the higher-ups claimed to prevent start manifesting because desperation removes restraint. And Gojo? He's alone. His students don't look at him the same way. The society he wanted to reform now sees him as the final boss. He's stronger than ever, more feared than ever, more isolated than ever. He became what Tengen warned against, a singularity of power so immense that the world warps around it, destabilizing everything it touches. He didn't save anything. He just accelerated the collapse. Here's what Gojo understood that the fantasy doesn't. You can't kill your way to a better world.
Not because violence is always wrong. Jujutsu sorcerers live in violence. But systems don't die when you remove the people running them. They metastasize, they evolve, they find new hosts. The corruption in Jujutsu society wasn't seated in the higher-ups. It was woven into the clans, the cursed energy economy, and the belief that some lives matter more than others. Killing the higher-ups would have been satisfying. It would have felt like justice. But satisfaction isn't the same as solutions. Justice without structure is just revenge with better branding. Gojo chose restraint, not because he was weak, but because he understood the cost of his own strength. The moment he decided to be judge, jury, and executioner, he'd lose the only thing separating him from the curses he fought, the belief that there's a difference between power and righteousness. The world didn't need Gojo to break it. It was already broken. What it needed was someone strong enough to hold the pieces together long enough for the next generation to build something different. He tried. And maybe that's the real tragedy, that restraint in the face of corruption feels like cowardice, even when it's the hardest thing you can do. So now you see what happens when the strongest sorcerer decides the rules don't apply to him. Gojo didn't save the world, he broke it, and the question isn't whether he could fix it, but whether anyone could survive the consequences. What do you think would happen if someone with that much power decided to play judge, jury, and executioner? Comment your thoughts below. I want to hear your theories. If you want more deep dives into anime's darkest alternate timelines, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join me as we explore what could have been and what might still be. See you in the next one.